Jamie, how are you, mate?
Very good, mate. Very good. Like I said, long time no speak. Last time we
Absolutely.
chatted was what, a few years ago.
Must be. Must be now, yeah. It's been a while. It's good to get you back on and good to catch up. And this time go a little bit more in depth and get to dig into the life of Jamie Jewitt.
The
Uh,
life of Jamie Jewitt. What a mad one it's been.
let's go back to the start, Jamie. Talk to me about your upbringing. What was your upbringing like and your household like?
Cool. My upbringing. It's funny because I reflect on this a lot recently. And obviously that's because I've now got three kids of my own. So I've always, one of the big things that's not shocked me, but I will say shocked, been a pleasant surprise about being a dad is just how much it sort of alters your perspective on everything, not only your current life, your goals, your motivations, all that sort of stuff. But it also makes you think about your childhood and your past and how you were raised. And because obviously a lot of your anxiety about becoming a new parent is around how how you're going to perform as a parent. And that's when you sort of dig into all of your memories about how you were raised, all the good things, all the negatives, if there are any, to try and sort of see what you will implement in your sort of parenting style. So that's the first time I've been asked that question in a long, long time. But like I said, now I've reflected on it a lot. I actually had an amazing childhood. Got amazing parents, really, really close with my parents still. And that is another thing that's come full circle since I've had kids. Like my relationship with my parents has always been really strong, but I've moved away. I've lived in New York for a long, long time in the States. I flew all over the world from like the age of 16 up till I was about 27. So although we were close, I didn't see him as much through those years. Now I'm moved back home, three kids of my own. I see him, I meet my dad every single day for a coffee. And my mum, doing business with my dad now right back in the hometown where it all started, which I swore I would never be living here. um, but things have just sort of come full circle, and I must say I'm happier for it. Um, and yeah, I'm like I get a lot of sort of nostalgia now through my own kids, because I can tell when I'm. So that's my bloody bar fridge. I'll go and turn it off in a sec. I can tell when I'm sort of just being a dad, all the sides of my old man that's come out of me. My mate said the other day when he brings his kids over, he said, "Gosh, you remind me of your old man when we were young," because I grew up with this guy. Um, so yeah, I had a really good childhood, really happy, and yeah, we were it's funny because we were fairly well off. Like we started, my dad didn't have a lot. My mum and dad didn't have a lot when we were first born, but my dad was a workhorse. Did carpets. He was a carpet fitter. Then he eventually took over his business, and then he started. Like I remember, we moved house every year and a half, 2 years, because he was obsessed with like capital gains, climbing the ladder, all that sort of stuff. Eventually, when we'd moved enough, he'd do the houses up while we moved, earn a little bit, and then he started building his own houses from scratch on the side, building flats, all that sort of stuff, and built his way up the property ladder. So, yeah, really happy childhood, great parents, really good relationships, close family, and sort of learned a lot from him really about hard work um, and how to sort of get ahead, especially considering he didn't really come from much. So yeah, that's kind of my childhood, and spent most of it up until, like I said, when I was about 16. I spent most of it in this little old town that I grew to hate. Now I've sort of come full circle and grown to love. Um, but yeah, it's funny how things change.
So you mentioned there your dad's hard work and almost the evolution and progression of your dad's hard work and that coming back into you guys as a family unit and the houses, etc., and obviously benefiting you guys. Did you appreciate that at the time, or is it only in hindsight where you've had to work hard yourself?
I think it used to drive us a bit mad, to be honest. Um, you know what? One thing I really remember, the moving house was a sticking point. a lot, moving house a lot. Don't get me wrong, we ended up in some fantastic houses. We had a swimming pool, and I remember sort of as we got into 10, 11, 12 years old, we were quite well off and really appreciated that. And having seen that where it started to where we were, you obviously appreciate that and you learn a lot from it. But I do have vivid memories of every weekend, like a Saturday or a Sunday, we would go and work on site from like young because my dad wouldn't really give us pocket money. Now, don't get me wrong, my dad they gave us a lot. They didn't spoil us, but we never wanted. But we wouldn't just be able to get given pocket money and do it for not doing anything for it. We'd always make us work on site, and we'd go and do like an 8 hour day shoveling and labouring and all that sort of stuff. And that's when we would get the things we sort of wanted, and we'd have Christmas money and birthday money and weekend money and going out with my mates. And I always remember I used to have 20 quid in my pocket. I remember he used to pay us 20 quid for the day, 30 quid, 40 quid. We sort of went up as we got older, as long as we worked hard. So he made sure he instilled that work ethic into us. And I do laugh these days because, and I speak to Cam about this a lot. I had an incredible work ethic, an incredible motivation, plans, goals, everything. When I was 16, I was probably, from what I remember, the best version of myself. And then I got into modeling and had everything basically. This is a big gripe of mine with that industry. I had everything handed to me basically. I get paid for the way I look. It's the most fucking ridiculous job in the world. Turn your head left and right, and you get given money, and you get told you're deserving of it of some way. And I never ever felt that. Never felt like it was fulfilling in any way or like rewarding because it wasn't. It was I didn't deserve a penny I got basically. Um, and that sort of got rid of all of the hard work my dad did because after 10 years of getting given money for very little, and when I moved away, I mean this is another story, but partying, drinking, all the money in the world, all the time in the world. I'd work once or twice a week if I was busy, and I'd get enough money to have a fair bit to spend. And I just turned into a lesser version of myself. And I found at the end of them 10 years, 11 years, my work ethic had gone. I was a little bit entitled. And it was a shame, really, because like I definitely sort of undid all of those great lessons that my dad taught and the things that I saw from him. Um, And again, this is another thing I reflect on quite a lot now. I'm a bit older and I've got kids, and it's like those things that I want to make sure that I do that my dad did for us, um, and the way that I've managed to see that you've got to be consistent with things. You can be raised a certain way. It doesn't mean you won't change if you drop the ball. Do you know what I mean? If you don't keep up with the lessons you get taught. So it's another one of them things as a parent. You've got to make sure that you can teach and show the way the best way to do things and guide your kids through life, but you also the job never stops. Do you know what I mean? And I think that a symptom of me moving away and my mum and dad not being there is how I let that sort of stuff slip. Um, it's funny, but yeah, I do have really good memories of the lessons he taught us as kids, and like I said, it was just unfortunate that I sort of undid them myself at one stage. But yeah, he was a good mum and dad. They're a great team. Taught us a lot of lessons about good relationships as well, to be honest. Because still to this day, the reason I meet my dad for a coffee is my mum and dad meet for coffee every morning, every afternoon. They'll go and have lunch. Like she helps with his businesses and stuff. She always has done her bit, book work and all this sort of bits and bobs. They're just a good team. So not only did I learn a lot of lessons about work ethic and stuff like that, and when I was younger, we sort of had a really good couple of role models about how to have a solid relationship. Yeah.
Let's talk about the time in America. You mentioned 16 to 27. Did you move to America because of modeling?
Yes. So I always remember my aunties were like, "Oh, you should be a model" and all this sort of stuff when I was younger. Um, I believe my mum took me up to walk-ins in London, and I got taken on. Fucked up story. It just goes to show what the industry's like. Got taken on by an agency that I later got dropped from because I was too fat, quote unquote. I had a bit of puppy fat, was a bit loose, wasn't exactly in shape, and I was like a bit swollen face and stuff, like you would when you're 16, like every ripped. And I used to weight lift and stuff, so I was quite a bit heavy, sort of chest heavy and that, a bit muscly. But they took me on and then asked me to lose the weight. I was trying to lose the weight. I was losing it, but not quick enough apparently, and then I got dropped. And then I continued losing the weight, trained hard, sort of become a bit obsessed, and then eventually got taken on by a different agency that I started working with. And then the agency that dropped me originally reached out and wanted to um, take me back on, which was a hard decision, but they were a bigger agency. But lo and behold, I went back to that agency. I eventually went out to Milan for the Fashion Week and Paris. Had a quite a successful first season. Walked for John Paul Gaultier in Paris, and then I went over and booked Calvin Klein exclusive, which is basically you get made an exclusive Calvin Klein model. And like when I went to Milan, I wasn't allowed to walk for anybody else. I just had to walk for Calvin Klein. That's when I met them. It's also when I met my New York agent, a woman called Lana, um, and she basically, after conversations with her, with Calvin Klein, and after I walked in their show, she just said it's a good idea to move out here. They want you to do their catalog work and stuff like that. So it was quite an easy decision, really. It was a big opportunity. It was something I'd loved. A lot of confidence when I was young. So, like 16, 17, moving to a city like that excited me. Plus, I had my brother's ID. I said I was 21. I looked just like him back then. So yeah, at 17, I moved over there and I was basically had an ID to show as an adult. So living out there, you can imagine the carnage as a 17-year-old in New York City effectively a fake ID. Um, and like I said, moved there and started working really well, earning some good money and working for Calvin Klein. And that's kind of where that started. And it just became the biggest earner for me, that city. Don't get me wrong, I flew around a lot. Calvin Klein flew us to Shanghai, to Rio de Janeiro, to Dubai. I remember they would just fly us everywhere to, and a good friend of mine was a Calvin Klein model as well, guy Danny. They just flew us to these crazy cities, and it was a hell of an experience. But yeah, a lot of debauchery came with that, and a lot of drinking, a lot of partying. Um, I'd say a lot of the things that sort of gave my life a little bit of bittersweet sort of twist to the story. I would say I had a lot of opportunity, a lot of great memories, but I also have quite negative memories of those years because I just partied too much, drank too much, and came out the other end of it with some sort of say like addiction problems, but like just I mean, it's not something I've even spoken about publicly. I've spoken about drinking publicly. All of these things are behind me now, so it's easy to talk about. But definitely looking back, knowing how heavily I was involved in that sort of stuff, and it just came part of the job. It's definitely was part of my later years when I moved home. Even when I went on Love Island, like part of my depression, all of that sort of stuff came from what was a really positive experience, but had really negative undertones just because of the nature of the industry, the age I was, all of those sorts of things. So it's yeah, it is crazy to think that that all started from walking into an agency as a 16-year-old little chubby kid and like, not knowing what was ever going to be ahead. Um, but yeah, it was there from that, from my mum taking me to walk-ins to flying all over the world. It was bizarre, a bizarre thing to think that that's how it happened. Um, but yeah.
You mentioned that you're not spoken publicly about addictions and things like that. Do you mind talking about that now?
Yeah, I'm fine talking about it. Like, because like, again, I don't have to go into detail. I mean, it's enough. Enough is enough said, really, on that front. In terms of like, I don't doesn't really matter what and when. It was everything really. It was like a just overindulgence in everything, in party scenes and lifestyle, and just the life I led was somewhat of a rock star lifestyle when I look back on it, but not. It's funny because I always used to say I used to be one. I didn't like the job I was doing because of the reasons I told you earlier. Didn't feel fulfilled. Didn't feel like what I was doing was respectable or really was deserved in any way. I didn't have a skill. I just kind of was handed life on a silver platter at that point. It's how I felt. So I had no respect for my job, and I had a lot of money and a lot of time on my hands. I had all friends that had a lot of money and a lot of time on their hands because they did the same job. And I was a young, good-looking lad in New York. Like it was with mates that were doing the same thing, looked the same way. It was just one of them things, and it just got carried away of, with being. It was like Zoolander, mate. It really wasn't that far off. Like it is ridiculous. When I think about that industry, it does make me laugh. And again, it's given me so much. I'm so thankful for everything I got from it. But also, it taught me a lot about the world. It taught me a lot about what I dislike about the world. I hate superficiality. I hate, um, this idea that looks matter at all, um, or that people have sold an image of somebody that's used to brainwash them into buying products by saying you need to look this way, and like they systematically chose people that looked one way because they knew the rest of the world didn't look that way, and then glorified it, made it look better, and money, helicopters, nice cars, nice watches, and this image of this model looking person back then, buy this product and you'll have this life kind of thing. And I just sort of learned a lot about the advertising industry. It was all smoke and mirrors. It's all about making people feel shit about themselves. So then you provide the answer to make them feel better. And that usually comes at a high price tag, and it's some superficial bullshit item that's supposed to do that. Or even a supplement, or a fucking diet tea, or a, leather jacket, whatever it is. I learned a lot about consumerism and how much I disliked it. And it's funny because my mates always used to say they saw me dress less and less impressively. I used to wear shoes till I had holes in them. I used to wear the same fucking jeans and t-shirt, and I still do to this day because it made me hate materialism. Um, so I had this job that I didn't respect. I had this hatred for the things that I was learning and being a part of selling, and I had time and money and an escape. Do you know what I mean? So it was. Now I look back on it, I forgive myself for being that way. Um, but yeah, it was like one of them things where I'm like, oh, I had such a good time. I was out all the time, and there's these funny stories that I tell. But really, the real me underneath was really conflicted and like angry and not, you know, I was enjoying myself when I was fucked up, but when I wasn't, that's when I sat with everything and thought, do I want to do this? Is like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? So yeah, it's a it's an understandable process of how I ended up escaping like that. Do you know what I mean?
I
It's
don't
mad. I
want
haven't talked about that for a long time. It's like speaking about it now makes so much sense to me how I ended up like living such a fucking mental life. And a lot of people don't really realize how mad it was.
No,
So
absolutely. I don't want to dwell too much on it, but the last question about that topic and the addiction side of it is, I want to, you say about rock star lifestyle, party lifestyle. Correct me if I'm wrong. I assume it's drink, drugs, cocaine, ecstasy, that sort of drug, party drug, as they call them. Um, you mentioned addiction. How often was you using, if you were, and how long did it take for you to get clean after you left the industry?
it was like it was again. I was never addicted to anything in particular. It was self abuse is how I've now learned to look at it. And it is that in reality. And it went through all sorts of smoking, drinking. Like yeah, there were drugs. Yeah, there was everything like that you would expect in that industry, that time, that place. Like it goes with that. So it was all of it. Do you know what I mean? It was, but the reality was I was going out 3, 4 nights a week sometimes. Sometimes those nights would last more than one night. Um, and it became hard to know how much of your life you were spending sober, like, or how much of your thought process was you and how much of it was like an intoxicated, depressed version of yourself because you're running away from something, or you're trying to avoid thinking about stuff. And I always had a really overactive brain. And that was something that was quite evident with me. And it's funny because recently I've been doing a lot of therapy about this, and that's how I come out the other end of it. And that's how I've got this ability now to look at it all objectively. Um, but the combination of the things that I liked and disliked about my situation, plus my overactive brain, overthinking, that stuff shut it off. Being with my mates and getting wasted and just having fun and laughing and taking the piss and going from here to there and everything else that would come with it and the after parties. And it was like I didn't have to sit in the sober version of myself that was in a situation that he disagreed with, but was tied to indefinitely because of my lack of skill. And I'd just come out of school. And what was I going to do? Go and get another job? Do you know what I mean? Like I've got all of this opportunity. And when I said about the 16-year-old version of myself being the best version of myself, it's funny because when I was 16, I had saved my money and looked after myself a little bit before I actually took that leap to New York, got away from my parents and started that spiral. And I bought a flat in Russell Square. I remember my dad helped me out. Bought a flat in Russell Square, renovated it, and sold it. And at like 17 years old or 18 years old, however I was, how old I was, I can't remember, which is another thing I've done to myself is fucked my memory up like bad. um, and I ended up selling this place, splitting up with my girlfriend at the time, and having about £90,000 in the bank. And then like going back out to New York. It's when I used to come home every couple of months or so, and then going out there. And I think that at that time, blowing all that money, and then every penny I got from that moment on. But being that 16-year-old who bought that place because I had goals and ambitions and good teachings from my dad and like good guidance. And that was the start of what was supposed to be the ladder from a sensible mind to become an adult and do what my dad did. And I undid that as soon as I went out there and these issues started. But it was because I wasn't happy with what I was doing, where I was, and like who I was really. So it's like I said, it's funny to look back now and know that that point was kind of the turning point when all my intentions were right, and that kid then had it all figured out, and then all of a sudden to know that I moved home at 27 just before I went on to Love Island, depressed with nothing. Do you know what I mean? So it's when I say I had a crazy life, yeah, I mean the people I met, I've went to Paris Hilton's birthday party in LA, like her house. I went had dinner right next to like it was Ben Affleck, Sean Penn, Jennifer Garner, all of these people in LA. Partied with Gerard Butler, like I just like these crazy little punctuation marks of like madness and places that I was with people I was with. But to be honest, I don't have fond memories of it because of all of that other shit. Do you know what I mean? It's weird to when I speak to people, oh, most people don't know the life I've led really. But even when I recall certain things, oh, it must have been amazing. I'm like, I probably did think it was at the time when I was medicating, you know what I mean, with all the bullshit and the partying and the fake smiles. But now I look back on it, it was kind of a huge positive with an underlying disaster waiting to happen. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
You mentioned turning point. So 16 years old, turning point. Was it going to New York, a big turning point in your life? Another turning point in your life was Love Island. 2017, day 32, you entered Love Island Series 3. I'm assuming you entered as a bombshell as you came in that late. Um,
Yeah.
and you mentioned you were into it depressed. Why did you go into Love Island at that stage of your life when you were feeling like that?
See, this is the thing. I've told this story, but I haven't. had, well, nobody's had any of the pretext, like anything that led up to that story of me saying I was depressed and I didn't want to do the show. And I said no. And this, like everything I've given you now, would shed more light on what, position I was actually in. Um, so I had done a reality show in New York. God, that's got to have been 2011,
So this was
maybe.
Ethos taking New York.
Yeah. So similar to Love Island, they someone I knew a lot of people in London from the industry and as far as I gather, they were looking for English people that lived in New York. My name came up a couple of times along with these other English lads I lived with and my Australian mate Ben. And this production company reached out on Facebook and started saying that we want to chat to you boys about being on a reality show. And we had no experience with reality then. And as a household, we all lived together in this flat, beautiful flat. Like the elevator opened up and we had the whole floor. Me, mate Danny, and my mate Ben. Um, and they were like, kind of wanted all three of us to be on the show in that setting. And we weren't keen on the idea. We were working relatively well. My work had sort of subsided at that bit. It was very temperamental, my career, because of the way I was being. So obviously, some days I'd turn up hungover as hell to jobs and get bad reputation, gain weight, all of it, not look healthy, and that's not good in my job. And that was happening periodically. So at the time, I didn't have a great deal of work on. I was actually working at a bar, doing bartending on the side as well. But we were chatting about it as lads, and we were like, oh, it's just not very, very apprehensive. And then eventually, the guys just turned up at the bar that I was working in, producers, and kind of really badgered us and eventually got us an interview. And I remember having a chat with the boys and just going, oh, it could be a laugh. Like, who knows what could happen? And it was a good channel, really good production company. We looked it all up and it was like, so we thought, fuck it, we'll give it a go. What we didn't know at the time is it was something called structured reality, which is like made in Chelsea Towie, where, I mean, reality is a word used loosely in that format because you'd get conversations with producers. They would take what you say about who you like or don't like or whatever, what's going on in your life, and then they would create a scenario. So I said that, oh, this girl Amy was, oh, she's quite attractive. I quite liked who she was when I first met her. And blah, blah. Oh, okay, so you take Amy on a date? Oh no, I don't want to take anyone on a date because I wasn't looking for a girlfriend, and that's kind of leading them on. And it was all these conversations going, oh no, 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 don't worry about it. We'll just, and then they'll set up, and all of a sudden you're sitting there on a date that you didn't set up, but you did set up, if you know what I mean. In the public's view, you've asked her out on a date, and that's kind of how it worked. And then, you know, stop rolling cameras, juice would run in. Maybe you ask her this and that, and maybe like, how would do you know what I mean? Stuff like this. You're never really forced to do or say anything, but you're very heavily suggested, and the whole narrative is really steered. Now, my character back then, the way they decided I would be is this womanizer. And I used to get around. Of course I did. But I never led people on. I would always lead first if I don't want a relationship. And I was never nasty to anybody. And I was kind of adamant about that. And all my friends knew it about me as well. I didn't like fucking around people telling girls you love them just to get in bed. All that bullshit I really didn't like. But it just so happened that, like I said, little things like making me go on a date, put him in a date situation, makes the public think I set the date up. So I'm whining and dining her and not wanting a relationship, which obviously she ended up catching feelings. I didn't know if it was real on or off camera. I think. And then because in my head, I'm like, I've told her that I don't want a relationship and I didn't set the date up. And surely she knows I didn't set the date up because she knows how this show goes. And eventually, like, we're supposed to be at this party and they asked me to bring a girl. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is a Canadian bird in town that is a good friend of mine. Like, just sort of see each other here and there casually, as I did. But I'm like, is Amy going to be there? Like, why would I? And they're like, yeah, no, 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 don't worry. Obviously, she knows it's nothing and all that. And just kind of built up to this moment. I walk in and they had her purposefully had just been talking about how she liked me and gotten on really well at this date. And then they have me walking fucking with this girl. looking like I had set this fucking thing up, and I just, it just made me look like a knob. Um, and that was my first, that was a part of my life I don't look back on fondly because I used to argue with these producers all the time. I shut my birthday down. It was one of my birthdays. I shut the set down because they did another thing similar to that, just making me look like a prick. Um, anyway, long story short, that was my first instance or experience with reality TV. The exec producer on that happened to be the exec producer on Love Island in 2017 when I had moved home. And I get a phone call from him on a Saturday night, and I'm in Ireland doing a modeling job. And he just says, Jamie, oh, I haven't spoken to you in ages. We want you to come on Love Island on Monday. Bearing in mind this was Saturday and I was in Ireland. I'm like, oh, fucking, in my head, I'm going, nah, fucking alarm bells, no way. Like, especially because it was, he was a good lad, this guy, good at his job. Like, I had no disrespect for him, but the experience was not great last time, and the position I was in, the mental state I was in, was not good. So in my head, it was a no. And I said to him, no, I'm not. I don't think it's right. And I spoke to my dad. You're not going to believe my dad's a reality TV junkie at the time. He watched everything. So when I rang my dad, he's like, oh, man, you're going to do it? And I'm like, no, it's not. All right. So I fly back on Sunday anyway, Sunday night. I wake up Monday morning, I had loads of missed calls. And then there's another producer on the show and saying, look, just come and fly to Mallorca, just chat to us. We've heard you're like apprehensive, you don't want to do it, but just chat to us. Worst case scenario, you have a free holiday, but just, come feel it out. So I'm like, oh, fuck it, okay, I'll go and feel it out. And as soon as I turned up there, trying to get me to go in, they'd already planned me to go in that night. So all of this stuff that he said on the phone was bullshit. This guy Theo and me were supposed to go in on the Monday night, and I just refused to go in when I spoke to the psychiatrist because you're supposed to before you go in. She said that you're suffering from depression. It was be her recommendation that I probably had a strong think about it. Don't do it. She didn't say that clearly. So I didn't go in that night and asked them to book me a flight the next morning. The next morning, the producers again, this guy that I know turned up at the door to chat to me. And to be fair, he knew me quite well from back then. We'd been through a lot. Um, and he sort of spoke to me as a friend in a way that this might help you. This might break you out your shell. This might get you out of this funk kind of thing. And then I remember I had a conversation with my dad that morning as well, and I could just hear it in his voice how desperate he was for me to do it because he thought it would help. Because, like I said, in that point, I was reclusive and wasn't in a good place. And I just remember thinking at that moment, thinking, fuck it, and gave him my phone, and that was all she wrote. Like I went in there, like I said, it wasn't by any means that I decided to do that show. If anything, I kind of went in kicking and screaming. Um, but then again, it's another one of them crazy turns of events where you're like, now look at my life. And that moment was the next turning point that led to me sitting here with three kids in a house with Camilla, having turned my life around completely and being able to look back on all this from just from a position that seems years, like light years away from where I'd ever expected myself to be at that point. I walked in there. So,
Well, so 7 years down the line now, and you're married with Camilla, who you met on the show, who is your partner on the show. Three kids, house, like you say, life's good. Now, when you left the villa on that day of the final, was you a new man compared to the man you walked in as?
yeah, yeah, and no. Like I was,
Did the experience help
still,
you in your depression?
yeah, it made me realize that avoiding contact with people is the hole that you put yourself in. And the remedy for that is the contact that you're avoiding and conversation and relationships and things. But I also was at a point where I didn't really have a social life when I wasn't fucked up, um, for the most part. And you can't drink in there. You have a 2 drink max. So it's 3 weeks of like intense conversation and relationship building. And I used to be the most social motherfucker you'll ever meet. Like I was confident, talkative, happy-go-lucky. Um, and that was another thing that kind of disappeared in me over the years. Um, but I went in there and it just reminded me that I'm better like that. Do you know what I mean? I'm better when I put myself in situations where I get to be myself because what I had been for the last 10 years, like, especially the 7 or 8 last years of those years in New York when it was bad, um, was I was never myself. I was this other person, this person that I just felt like I had to be to like feel not numb, but I don't know, to like feel confident. Problem is with drinking and partying and doing, you know, that sort of living that sort of life, you become something that is supposed to give you confidence and absolutely does at the beginning, becomes your dependence. I'm dependent on it for that confidence after a while. So then it sucks all the natural confidence out of you, and then it's got you, and then all of a sudden you don't know who you are without it. Like, or on the flip side, when you're not drunk, you're still hungover, so you don't feel like conversating, and then you take the edge off to have a conversation, which leads you back. So you just lose who you were and who you are. And one thing I realized in there, because people, it's the another funny thing about it. People saw me in there and were like, wow, you were so calm and quiet. And I'm like, that's pretty much who I am sober. I'm like a chilled person, chilled, friendly, pretty non-offensive, if you know what I mean. I'm like, I'm not loud, I'm not, but and because so many of my mates just knew me as this fucking nutter. But yeah, it definitely it gave me a taste of what it's like to have a bit of normality back in my life and get my personality back. And from that moment on, it became a conscious effort to get that person back. And I must say, big thing that helped is the day that my kids were born. First, now obviously, and just the responsibility. There was a I mean, that moment was hard as hell as well. That transition in that moment with them high stakes was really difficult. But it was worth all of the arguments and like learning on the job that you do as parents, stressful on your relationship. It was hard for me having sort of still going through this whole transition. I drank quite a bit. Sometimes I would go on and off for drinking a lot. I was drinking a bottle or two of bottles of wine a night during COVID. Right. So that was quite a heavy drinking period. I realized as well that part of a symptom of my attempt to heal and not drink and not go out was that I switched it with binge eating. And that was something I did, smoked. So, like, trying to get rid of this part of my brain, this addictive personality, it always sort of manifests itself in different ways. You stop that, this starts, stop that, this starts. And it's been chipping away, like I've been chipping away at it ever since. And it's only now that I can probably say comfortably, I'm well past that version of me. Um, but meeting Cam, going in that show, and having my kids, and having someone like Cam, who, like I said, she's very similar to me, actually went in the show with a very similar story, completely different, but very similar. From social dislocation, all these sorts of things. And so me and her were just a really good match in that way, but both had a lot of development ahead. And now I look back and it's like, yeah, it's all of these lessons are things that I'm thankful for now and make me so content now that I've got my 3 kids and I've gone through all of that and I've got like it's a wealth of life experience to look back at and go, okay, there's a lot of lessons in there, a lot of mistakes. That's where lessons come from. But ultimately, I'm sat here now in a place where it's a great story, and I can start to look at it like from a fond memories. It's when I get to the end of this story that I'm like, oh, it's actually quite a nice story. It's funny because when I'm at the beginning, I'm like, oh fuck this, I don't want to reminisce about it. But it is funny how life goes like that. It's just yeah. So now I'm looking back and thinking Love Island, in a crazy way, was one of the biggest things that started that path to properly healing.
Well, you say, you don't like obviously certain parts and certain stories throughout your life, and there's plenty of negative, but there's also plenty of positive. One thing I would say, Jamie, is that as they say, everything happens for a reason, but everything that's happened to you in your life has shaped the person you become today.
Mm.
Now, you said that the best version of yourself was when you're 16 years old. So I'm going to come full circle now. The last question I'll ask you, Jamie, how close are you to being back to the best version of yourself now?
Like I said, it's funny when I get to the end of the story because I do realize that's probably me now. Like it definitely is because when I say about, I mean, how do you measure the best version of yourself? Like who you are morally, I don't think that ever really changed. I've always had strong morals. I was raised well. Um, what it did do was probably get a little bit cloudy because of being under the influence so much. Like, do you know what I mean? And getting depressed and all of the symptoms that come with that. But morally, I've always been the same person. In terms of my motivations and my goals and my achievements and my focus, now I've gotten all of that back because that's what I lost. And but the addition to that is I've got these kids that have shown me how good of a dad I can be, how much I can enjoy it, and how important everything I've gone through has been. Because now I do believe I'm very, very good dad because of it. And that's all I want to do now. Like, having told you all that crazy story, all I want to be is a dad. All I want to have is a quiet life. Like, I don't like social media. I'm the worst influencer in the world. That's why I barely fucking post. But I've got a property development project going on. I've got another project. I'm trying to build things that keep me away from all of that stuff. But ultimately, I want to live a quiet life with my kids and spend every day with them. And that's something that I've shown myself and remembered about myself is the caring side of me. And now I get to take all of that shit and channel all the lessons into being what I want to be now. And that is the best dad I can be and live a quiet life because fuck me, I've had enough noise in my life up to this point. But all of it necessary in a weird way to, like you've just said, be able to pat myself on the back and say, you're probably right now the best version of yourself. So,
Absolutely. Jamie, it's always a pleasure, but I want to thank you for opening up, talking about things you not spoke about.
weird, mate. It's quite emotional talking about it because it's yeah, it's been a long, long road. But yeah, it's the kids that do it to me. I think about all that and I'm just like, oh God, I'm lucky to be in the position I am considering what I've gone, the roller coaster that I've got taken to get here.
Definitely, you're doing a great job. Doing a great job, mate. But like I say, thank you very much for your time. I always appreciate it.
Appreciate it, bro.